part of a series of tutorials on creating a multiple choice Python program, and in this first tutorial we're going to have a look at some of the planning that needs to be done before you would start doing any coding. So we're going to have a look at the finished product just for a moment, just to see what we're going to be trying to produce. So this is the code here, and let's run this. Okay, so this is parts of the flower quiz type program, and we have some instructions down the bottom and a button in the middle to begin the quiz. So we have a multiple choice question, choose an appropriate answer, score changes, button here which was inactive now becomes active, and we can either click on next question, and we'll also have the keyboard return key or enter key active so that it can also go to the next question if we wanted it to. We have a quit button down the bottom, obviously to quit the program if we wish to. Clicking on next question brings up next question. The next question button is inactive again. Let's choose an appropriate answer. So the score once again changes, and the next question button has changed to retake quiz, because this quiz at the moment only has 2 questions, and so at the end to indicate that to the user we have retake quiz instead of next question. So if we click on retake quiz, it brings us back to this stage here, and we can either retake the quiz if we got some questions wrong, want to try it again, or we can click on quit. We'll look now in a bit more detail at the various parts of our program. The beginning screen then. Okay, what you can see here is I've taken a screenshot of that and just highlighted some various parts of this, and we can talk about also the functionality that needs to go on behind this. Well, we've got a main question frame, so what I've done is I've created a window, 800 by 500 pixels, and then I've decided to put a large frame inside that window called main question frame. You could decide to simply put things into the parent window, and that would work perfectly fine as well. I've decided to go with putting things inside a frame. And then inside that we are going to have a heading frame, so a frame widget, and that is going to have in it a label that I've decided to call heading underscore label. Now you need to appreciate that all of these would be instance variables, so they would all have self dot in front of them, so they're available to the whole program if they needed to be. Then one thing that I've forgotten to highlight, so I'll do it now, and that is the question frame. So that is this one here, this rather large frame that's going to have the question in it soon, and that is simply called the question frame. Now as you can see, there's also a button that is right in the middle of that, and that is I've simply called begin quiz. Now there needs to be some functionality behind that. What we need to have happen here is that when you click on that, some things change. I want the instructions at the bottom to disappear, I want the begin quiz button to disappear, and I want the question to appear, and also down the bottom I want a score to appear and a button, 2 buttons in fact, one that says next question and another one that says quit, as we'll see on the next screen in a moment. Just finishing this off then, we've got the question frame, we've got underneath that the instructions frame, and then inside that a label that actually has the instructions themselves. There is a portion of the screen which you may be wondering about, this particular portion in here. Where is that coming from? Well, that's simply part of the main question frame that doesn't have anything else in it. Now, why are they all blending together? Simply because I've used the same background color on the frame and all the various widgets apart from the begin quiz. Here we are looking at the second part really of the program, where after begin quiz has been clicked, a significant number of changes have been made. Most obvious one probably is the fact that we now have a question with the question number, and then next to it the actual question, and then the radio buttons that have the various options. So a bit of thinking needs to go behind that. We need to know what the question number is, so what we're up to. So we're going to have a variable that keeps track of the question number. We have to get the actual question itself from somewhere, and so what we're going to do is we're going to create a question object that has part of it the actual question, and we're going to grab that information and then put it into this question label. We're going to also need to do the same thing when we create the radio buttons, so we'll use a for loop to create the radio buttons, and then the information for each of the options we also need to grab from that question object. So the question object will have the correct answer, some dummy answers, we'll combine those to make a list of answers, and we'll simply produce a radio button for each of the possible answers and place them one underneath the other. When you click on one of the radio buttons, we want a number of things to happen. We want to know whether the answer was correct or not, so coming down the bottom of the screen down here we'll have a score that will keep track of which has the person got that right or wrong, and we want to increase their score by 1 if they've got it correct. So we need some variable called score perhaps that keeps track of the score initially set to 0. The other thing we want to have happen is this next question button, which is currently disabled. We want that to become active, so we need that to happen as part of really processing the question. Down the bottom I've highlighted a number of different things here that are quite important in trying to get this layout correct. So what I've done is I've created a score and question container, so that's going to be a frame. Into that I've placed 3 different other frames and labels. So I've got a score frame here, I've got a score text label, I've got a next question frame and a next question button, and something I haven't highlighted, we're going to have a button down the bottom, the quit button, and that's going to have to go in its own frame as well, and into that frame we're then going to place the button. Now you might notice I've also got these zeros and ones here. What's that all about? What I've decided to do here is to use the grid method to put the various things into that score and question container. Also needing to get these 2 parts here of the same width, otherwise it just doesn't look very balanced. So we'll have a look at how we can do that in the coding by setting a minimum width for the columns. So I've highlighted here, we've got column 0 and then column 1, and then over here row 0 and row 1. So when we have a look at the coding, we'll see that we're going to use those various references to put the various things in their correct place. Next part of the program, what we have here is what's going to happen when a user has clicked on one of the radio buttons. Okay, as you might be able to see, the radio buttons have become inactive, so that a user can't make different choices until they simply stumble upon the right one. If they get the correct answer, we want the score to be updated by 1. We want the button here to become active, and so when a user clicks on next question, we want some changes to happen. Also, it'd be good if we could have not only this button that takes us to the next screen, but also the return key. So over here we have the question number, which has been updated, the question itself, obviously some new choices relating to the second question, and we want this button to become inactive again. So in other words, they can't move on to the next question until they've answered this one. Okay, so here we have the last question that's been answered. Well, in this quiz we only got 2 questions. You might have many more than that, but at some stage you're going to reach the last question. So the user has made his or her choice. The score, if it's a correct answer, has been updated once again, but instead of a new question appearing, the change instead is to the next question button. Instead of it saying next question, it simply says retake quiz. So not only does the text have to change, which is a very simple thing, but the functionality has to change, which is more difficult. What we want to do is to basically reset the program. So the score has to go back to 0. We have to bring back up question 1. We have to make sure we're going back to the right screen, and yeah, so that functionality needs to change considerably for that particular button. Okay, and once we've done that, we would have reached the end of our program. Now there are a number of possible things that could make this program a lot better. One would be to incorporate some images. So when you're talking about various parts of a flower or whatever the topic might be, it'd be nice to have a picture. That would be a possible advancement that we can make later. It would be nice to have a welcome screen at the beginning that wasn't just a begin quiz. So for example, to have a welcome screen that asks the user for their name, and then after they've typed their name in, and then take them through to that first screen that we had in our original program. So there's some possible things we could do to advance this program. In the next part of this series of videos, we're going to have a look at creating the basic framework. So the original screen where we have the begin button, the heading, the instructions, and we'll also create a number of widgets which will be used later on in the program as well. So look forward to seeing you there.